everyone. So as promised, just here to show you some of the internal comms tools within the Rippl platform. I'm doing that here on desktop because you'll be glad to hear that you have full access to all of the comms tools in terms of the self-serve and being able to add content yourself. So naturally, that's something you would do on a desktop. Although, of course, when I come to show you the mobile demo, I'll show you how your own colleagues can get involved in sharing information should they want to. So the kind of the simplest form of the internal comms functionality within the platform is the ability to share on this timeline. So I already showed you the recognition and the nomination and how that forms onto the site, but you have the ability here to share posts. So actually anyone that you give permission to in the platform can do this. You may decide that's just the comms team. You may decide actually we want to allow anyone to post on the timeline because there may be great stories they want to share. There may be things happening in their day-to-day work life they want to share. So totally up to you. You can even be as granular to say, we only want the comms team to be able to add these elements, but for anyone else, they may be able to post, but they might not be able to add any bits to it. And of course, things like scheduling would be admin only. But just to kind of show you here, so you could type your update in here, usually just a short and snappy update, kind of more short updates rather than your longer form stuff. You can obviously add a photo, you can add video content of which that content's hosted in the Rippl platform, so it's kind of cloud hosted rather than requiring you to host it anywhere else. And you can add attachments too. So if you wanted to say there's a new policy coming out for this certain process tomorrow, here's the policy document here, the PDF, so have a read. You can add tags to your post. All of these are dictated in the admin area, so these can be unique to Biocair. And then this again, that grouping structure we talked about in the initial demo. So you then be able to share which group that's relevant to. So if I'm sharing this with global, am I just sharing it with USA, China, South Africa, for example, I can choose them there. And you even have the opportunity as a super admin to say, I actually want to restrict it to a certain role. So if you had, as an example, all drivers for your vehicles that are kind of transferring goods around, you could have that as a role and you would then share it with them. So it's quite interesting in the ways you can cut and slice the data within the system. And then you can also schedule content. So if someone's super organized, they're going on holiday, they want to schedule it and potentially even hide content as well, they can start and end content here. So that's the simplest option. That will just appear as a post on the timeline. So I don't think I showed you this before, but just as an example, this is a post here from Emily 8 months ago. So you can even use emojis. And of course, because it's on the timeline, it's very LinkedIn-like. People can add comments, they can ask questions, they can react. So you start to get that feeling of community and two-way engagement rather than just one-way engagement all the time. And the other thing is that you can also pin this content. So if you want to pin something particularly important, you may have a really active timeline with lots of recognition happening, which is obviously the end goal. But you can pin things so you can ensure it gets seen at the very top. And of course, if you need to edit it, you can delete it and all sorts of stuff. So that's that covered off. The other piece then is you can also have articles in the newsfeed published. So this is an example where actually on behalf of the platform, we've gone and posted an article, and that's what's pulling through here. So it's almost like a little widget to say, Monty's has just published this article. It gives you a little bit of a snippet. If I then click on this, it's going to take me through to the newsfeed. So I'm just going to do that now to show you. You can also see here that this has been shared with everybody in the business on the Monty's site, and I've also attached some tags to it. So that's going to load up now. I've got an image attached to it. This is very simple in terms of it's all HTML content. I'll show you the editor in a moment. You can add formatted text in here. You can add video content, documents, images, links, anything you need really. And again, you can have tags for news articles, which is really good. And again, people can react to content. They can ask questions or comments. You can disable comments if you were perhaps sharing a bit of, not all news is good news. So you may want to disable comments in some circumstances. That's also possible. But just to go back to the news feed, that's taking me to the timeline. We'll go back here. So here you can see it's a very simple tile format, very much like the benefits dashboard. So you can see all the content that's been posted. I can click on different tabs to see what content's been shared under those topics. Again, those editable by you. And there's also a search functionality. So if I wanted to go, if I remembered something from a few months ago and I want to return that to that information, I can go search for it there. And as I mentioned, you will only see the news articles that have been shared with your group. So if it's not relevant to your audience, you wouldn't see it in here, which I think is the most powerful thing. So in terms of editing this stuff in the burger menu, admins or anyone you give permission to have access to this would have access to the article management section. You can see here I've actually got quite a few drafts ready, waiting, pending. So I could either go in and go and edit some of this stuff. Very simple to use, really intuitive, title, summary. You then build out the blocks of content that you want within the article. So in this instance, I've just got some text. I can then go and add an image, I can add a video, I can embed YouTube in there, really, really flexible. And then this is the preview image that would be shown on the front end. I can then add those attachments. And I can add that audience in. So who do I want to see this? So they've already pre-selected everyone here. This is a little bit detailed, but you can either have it appear in the newsfeed like you just saw, or if for some reason you just wanted to host something in the newsfeed, like it could be a policy or some information, you can still have it there, but it wouldn't actually be accessible from the timeline. It would be kind of hidden in the background, and you'd only be able to access it if you sent someone a link. So actually quite a useful content management tool should you need it for people who want to access that information on the app. Again, making sure it fits for your workforce type. That's nice and easy. You can again schedule this content. That's where I said you can disable comments should you want to. And this one's really important. The benefit of using the comms tool in Rippl is, of course, if you have the app downloaded, you can get push notifications. So we're helping to drive engagement to this stuff, making sure that your colleagues know about things when they happen. So you can either enable or disable those notifications should you want to, and that's obviously where you add in your tags. You may have seen on the front end there when I showed in the news articles, it kind of said read by 7 people. That's a very light touch analytics. You would, of course, get in the back end a full report showing you here's all the articles that have been published with the titles, who it's been published to. And you get a breakdown of how many views it's had, how many unique views it's had. So you can start to understand how people are engaging with that content to know what sort of content resonates and where you should be focusing your resources, I guess. The only other thing to show you then is there's a couple of other tools that people will use for comms within Rippl, and one of them is in the format of decks. So if I just go and click on something like this, Learn, decks can come in lots of different can wear lots of different hats in Rippl. A deck is essentially a mini PowerPoint, that's why we call it a deck. You can have questions, copy as in text, images, video content, anything you want in there. And therefore that gives it an opportunity to be used for lots of different things. So in this example, I've titled this deck page Knowledge. And in Monty's example, we're using it for learning content. So a manager's guide to recognition is a really good example where you could then add imagery, text, and you're giving out information. So it's another form of communicating information to someone. So hence why I'm showing it to you as part of the internal comms tool. So now I've completed that, that's gone into my completed deck. Again, you can push this out to certain audiences. You can attach reward to decks. So if you really wanted someone to go and complete something or provide feedback or complete a survey, you could give them a couple of points if they finish that. So you can do micro reward behind these things. And you can use these decks for lots of different things. So this one's for knowledge. We also have it set up here for feedback, so like a virtual ideas hub, which I mentioned to you before. You could also do it for things like surveys, competitions. So you can start to see now we can relabel the page in whatever way you need it to be, and you can use it in whatever way you need. So a really useful tool, but very useful for guides, coaching, information sharing, policies maybe. Yeah, totally up to you how you use this. And of course, you again get all the analytics on the back end to see who's completed it, who's in progress, etc. So another tool that you could consider along the way. So yeah, that brings the internal comms demo to an end. But any questions, let me know.